It's still loading. Give it a little bit longer. Sorry.
Yeah, if you just want to give me a thumbs up when I should go, you let me know. Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're so glad you're here. If you have ever wondered what it really takes to move the needle on employment, you are in the right space. Today, you'll hear directly from leaders doing this work, what's working, what they've learned, and what advice they have for others looking to create change. My name is Lexi Roberts. I am a network advisor with StriveTogether, and I have the utmost privilege of partnering closely with Rocky Mountain Partnership as they work to advance employment outcomes in Colorado's North Metro region. In my role, I get to support the team in strategy, peer learning, connections across the Cradle to Career Network, which is a national network of community partnerships working to ensure every young person has a clear path to economic mobility. Today's conversation is about their work, the strategies, the partnerships, and the systems they've built to drive results in employment. And we are joined with some incredible leaders in this space. We have with us Jody Nowicki, who is the Senior Director of Stakeholder Engagement at Rocky Mountain Partnership. We have Dr. Bobby Pace, the Provost and Vice President of Academic Success at the Community College of Aurora. And we have Garrett Anderson, who is the Chief Economic Growth Officer for Commerce City. So this is going to be a great live for us to dive into conversation. And as we are, we really encourage you all drop questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring and doing our best to answer along the way and even have a little bit of time at the end for a Q&A. So let's dive into the conversation. Let's get us started. I would love to turn it over to Rocky Mountain Partnership to talk a little bit about the vision driving this work before we dive into the robust conversation. So Jody, can I pass it your way?
Yes, thank you, Lexi. Excited to be here. Just to give a little bit of context on who we are at Rocky Mountain Partnership Cradle to Career, we are currently the only StriveTogether network in the state of Colorado. As Lexi mentioned, we're north of Denver in the Adams County, Broomfield, Arvada, Aurora region. And we have a really clear goal that by 2030, 71,000 more young people up to the age of 35 will be meeting milestones that we know are critical from cradle to career. And that ladders up to this national goal that StriveTogether has put out there of 4 million more nationwide. And so we're really excited to be doing our part in this North Metro region towards that. And we have a lot of really amazing partners who are the ones driving this work. Specifically, we have what we call target champions, so organizations that are setting their own numbers towards our regional 71K goal. Both of our partners on here today are two of our very many target champions. And then we also facilitate these high impact projects because we know that there are some challenges that are too big for any one school, nonprofit, city department, organization to fix alone. And so high impact projects, or HIPs, are how we work on those together. Each of these projects brings the right partners to the same table, focused on a specific challenge, moving towards real outcomes and building the kind of trust and shared learning that makes the work stick over time. And what we're talking about today is the fact that we know and believe that every learner deserves a clear path to a good job, regardless of where they're starting from. And right now, that path is harder to find than it should be, right? There's a lot of fragmentation. Programs exist, but don't always connect. Credentials are earned, but they don't always lead anywhere. And employers have jobs, but they can't find prepared candidates. And so through this high impact project that's really focused on expanding access to purposeful career pathways, we're working to connect every learner in our region to what's possible. And in particular, there's a lot of work happening, but we're excited to really dig in today on Commerce City Promise as a shining light and example of what is possible when the right partners with the right attitude and vision come together.
Oh my goodness, just from that, there is no shortage of some incredible work happening over in Colorado and in partnership with Rocky Mountain Partnership. So let's keep the conversation going. Before we get into the weeds of the incredible work that's happening in partnership, I want to just give everybody an opportunity to talk a little bit about their why and what brings them to this work. And so as we start off in this conversation, I would love for you all to each take a moment and just share, how you came to this work, what sustains you to keep going in this field. Really just share with folks a little bit about your why. And so, Jody, if you don't mind kicking us off, and then we'll pass it to Dr. Bobby, and then Garrett, you'll round us out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that the why for me is that the clarity around what it is we're working to achieve, and we are doing the hard and slow but really important work to really make sure that systems work for young people. I come from a direct service background, which is really rewarding work, but can be also frustrating when you're stuck in a system that's not yielding the results that you want to see. And so I feel really lucky to be part of a backbone team that gets to support the partners doing the hard and important and critical work in the most aligned and effective way possible. So honored to be here, and I will pass it to Garrett.
Thanks so much, Jody. What we at the city, we're kind of in that direct service role where we're working directly either with the residents of the community or the businesses. Commerce City is kind of your core industrial areas in Denver. A lot of blue collar jobs in construction and manufacturing, logistics. We work a lot with both the residents and the businesses just to make sure that pipeline of career training and those pathways are in place. And that's the most rewarding part for us is when we see those systems working and we see lives changing and families getting better income and employment in the community. In a parallel track, entrepreneurship and seeing folks open a business that's really fulfilling their dream. Those kind of things is why we do what we do at the community level.
Mm.
And I think one of the personal experiences for myself, both my parents were community college students, and so my mom actually graduated, but my dad was not a graduate. In fact, he went for one semester and dropped out. And as a vice president here for instruction, I take that both that opportunity for economic advancement that my mom was able to achieve, and also the reality that sometimes you don't finish what you start, and to understand the student experience about what kind of keeps a person from completing and how it can intimidate them, and sometimes how the pathway to a degree, a diploma, a credential, sometimes is circular. My dad actually wound up teaching for a community college down the road, but dropped out in the beginning. And so for me, I recognize that so much of what we do is lifelong. And so we take kind of the experience we all have and carry, and then this exciting part about partnering with the city and Rocky Mountain Partnership to really ensure that the knowledge we have for students and learners and program development is something that we can actualize to improve the lives and conditions of all of our adult learners, and also the young people in our community as well.
Oh my goodness. Thank you all for sharing. Just brings such warmth to the conversation. And I'm sure many folks can resonate to the entry points and the stories of what brings you all to this work, and the value and the collaboration that keeps you sustaining and committed to it as well, which I think it's so important that we ground in that purpose that drives this work too, because it's such a motivator and brings the energy. Well, I think just as important as our why is also where we're doing this work and in place. And so, Rocky Mountain Partnership works across 4 jurisdictions in the Colorado North Metro region, across Adams County, Arvada, Aurora, Broomfield, and that is a region that is very diverse and also growing. And like many other places, are facing real economic pressures. And so help paint a picture for us of the community that you all serve, and what the employment landscape looks like for young people there. So Jody, could I kick it off to you to start a little bit to set that stage?
Absolutely. I can speak really broadly to the region, then I'll kick it over to Garrett to talk about Commerce City specifically. But you're right. I mean, our region is very broad north of Denver. It's a lot of suburban, some rural, and industrial areas. And it's big geographically, and it's also very quickly growing, like you said. And so when we look at employment rates for 25 to 34-year-olds across that full region, it's about 87%. of young people are employed. But when we look at how many households in that region are earning a self-sufficient wage, it's closer to 68%. We have 66% of households earning a living wage. And then there's lots of different ways that you can measure this, right? In Colorado, we have what's called the Colorado Talent Pipeline Report, which defines tier 1 and tier 2 living wage jobs, which is really tier 1 are benchmarked by an income that can support a family of 3 with 2 adults, 1 working and 1 child, with tier 2 benchmarked as an income that can support 1 adult. And for our region, there's about 60% of households earning that tier 1 and 77 households earning that tier 2 living wage. And so there is a lot of work to do to get people employed, but also employed with the wages that will allow them to not only survive, but thrive. And ultimately what we're working towards is building generational wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and as you said, Lexi, the service area for Rocky Mountain Partnership is much larger than just Commerce City. But just to describe our specific situation, we're a primarily Hispanic community on the just northeast of downtown Denver. We the school district that serves us is Adams 14. Adams is a reference to the county, Adams County, and we've got a student body population of roughly 90% Hispanic. Many of those, probably in the neighborhood of 20%, are immigrant families that are coming in. Others have really deep roots and have been here for many generations, so that's somewhat diverse. The employment base, as I mentioned, is primarily trucking, construction, manufacturing, that kind of things on the existing side. That transition out of high school is mostly non-college bound. At least not to a 4-year degree kind of a thing. Mostly we're looking at other types of skills training. There's a tremendous amount of entrepreneurship and small businesses that people are opening up. And we support that ecosystem as much as possible as well. And it's a very exciting and vibrant community here in Commerce City.
Yeah, thank you all so much for setting that context, because I think it paints a picture of just the diversity, not just in one, in Commerce City, but then, Jody, across the multiple counties that you all are supporting in Rocky Mountain Partnerships work. And I'm sure many people, as you were talking, Garrett, about the industry and the sectors and the population, the diversity of the folks can resonate in their own communities of the students and families that they serve as well. And so I think it'll be so valuable for us to hold on to that as we talk about the incredible work that's happening in the partnership. And I think, to only make set the stage for that even more is to really be grounded in the shared goals and vision for what's possible in community. And so, Rocky Mountain Partnership has not been quiet. They are bold in their population level goals. They have set that goal of 24,444 more young people reaching a good wage. And Jody, you talked about it, like there is targets around a good wage and generational wealth, and you all are stating that boldly alongside partners. And you do that, with the horizon on 2030, and through different avenues like your target champions your regional target champions that you mentioned. And they've also committed to do this work with you all in supporting bringing, nearly an estimation of just 10,000 young people towards that 2030 goal. And so, how does that target champions model turn a number that, is big and bold into shared accountability across sectors, rather than just any single one institution owning that? I would love to hear a little bit about how you all have set that up. So I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned before, target champions are entities that are in our partnership that do the direct service work that directly impact cradle-to-career milestones. Most of our target champions impact multiple milestones. And so really, we support those organizations to set their target if they haven't already set a target. They track it through a regional scorecard that we have, and our team also supports them to develop what we call a key driver tool, which is really mapping out the problem they're working to address, the data that shows what the problem is, the root causes of that, what they're doing to address those root causes, and then data points that they're looking at, key performance metrics in real time, and report that data quarterly. And so you can go to our scorecard and see all of those target champions and drill down to their specific targets and progress and work. And it's really amazing to just see the vulnerability and transparency that so many partners in our region have said, we believe in this, we're better together, and this is what our part towards that 71K goal is. So that is the target champion model in a nutshell. And then I know we'll put Garrett and Bobby in the spot because both their organizations have actually set targets, and there's some overlap with the Commerce City Promise that we'll talk about as well. But individually as organizations, they have really specific targets that they've committed to and are working towards.
Sure, yeah, I can go first. Commerce City's goal by 2030 is to have an additional 2,100 folks enrolled in training that helps them attain a better job, right? We're measuring the enrollment as well as the actual jobs themselves, and then what kind of additional wages can be created through the training that they're receiving. So yeah, that's our goal, is in the next roughly 5 years, get just over 2,000 folks through that kind of additional skills training.
And if I can just brag on the city for a minute, it's all of that. I think that what's really unique is they're looking at the enrollment, the attainment, the employment, and targets like broken down within there. But there's such a unique focus on that business retention and attraction, which I think is really important. Like, and you said it, Garrett, but I think it's worth doubling down on, is that you're measuring how many quality, good paying jobs are being created as a result of the good work that the city is doing around business retention and attraction. Because if our young people don't have places to employ them, that's such an important piece of the puzzle. And I think really amazing that has been called out.
One other thing, just to put that in context, we're a community of roughly 75,000 population with a total workforce of roughly 40,000. Just so that 2,000 then is in context of that overall population.
Yeah.
And, at the Community College of Aurora, we are focusing specifically on our concurrent enrollment population. So those are our students who are starting to take some kind of class that is college credit earning in their high school years. And that we're proud to say we serve over 68 different high schools throughout the state of Colorado. So it's a huge number of folks, primarily in 3 districts. But what is exciting for us is we have a part of our strategic plan. We have a goal by 2030 of essentially having 32% of our concurrent enrollment students who actually graduate from high school to persist into post-secondary education, either here at CCA or somewhere else. So that's about 1,174 students. And we're really looking at the paradox that occurs in Colorado, which is we're one of the most highly educated states. We mostly import that education. We're not actually home growing a lot of our folks who are actually completing some kind of post-secondary credential, so post-high school credential. And to Garrett's point, when we're talking about Commerce City, in particular, our Hispanic male population is that is the population that we're really losing as a state. And that's something where where CCA has been truly focused. We too, much like this Commerce City, we're the most diverse institution of higher education in the state of Colorado. We're about 68% students of color. We are both an MSI, which is a minority serving institution, as well as an HSI, Hispanic serving institution. And so the demographics, the population that we serve are pretty similar. And so we have a shared goal of essentially making sure that we don't lose those students as they matriculate from high school and let it just kind of end there, that we want to make sure that they're able to earn a living wage to set themselves up and their future families indefinitely.
Oh my goodness. And one, Jody, all bragging is welcome here in space because I think so many others want to hear about what's working and what success you all have already achieved. And so many of the points you all are talking about too, I think other communities are navigating to what metrics and data do we look at when we're thinking about that quality employment. But then also, Dr. Barb, you're talking about how do we really bridge some of that data from high school to post-secondary completion to really set the path for this, and how do we connect those pieces to drive where there's the largest opportunity to support community in that pathway for good quality employment, and what does it look like to define that? And you said it's shared goals, it's shared alignment around that. And I think as we dive into you all's partnership and really dig into the exceptional work that you've done, I think that that's a testament to the commitment that you all have made, and it's particularly really catalyzed by the regional target champion work that Rocky Mountain Partnership is deeply committed to. So let's get into it. Let's talk all things C3 Promise, right? Because I think that is a concrete example of the cross-sector partnership and work in action. So, I want to bring folks along in that journey, right? That this partnership of City of Commerce, City and Community College of Aurora, how you all partnered, leveraging some ARPA dollars, and this C3 Promise really, isn't just a program, it's a shared commitment across the city and the community college and the community. And so I just want you all to really tell us about how that partnership came to be. What does it look like for a young person to go through that? And, what are you all already seeing from getting that work started in the community? So maybe Garrett, do you want to kick us off with bringing us along that journey?
Yeah, I'd be happy to kick it off and talk a little bit more about the program itself, and then maybe Bobby can tell us a little bit about more of the student journey at that point. So our program is part of an overall citywide program that we call Advancing Commerce City Together, ACT. I guess there could be two C's there with Commerce City, but we just call it ACT. But yeah, and it's a broader program, including things like livability and property improvements to bringing people's homes up to code enforcement, support and compliance, emergency rental and mortgage assistance, environmental air quality kind of improvements, food equity. It's a lot of different social programming throughout the community. And one component of that is this workforce development program that's designed to give people opportunity for short-term credential programs with CCA for free, paid for by the city, in cooperation with Rocky Mountain Partnership and CCA. We cover 6 specific areas for the tuition for free, and we looked really carefully with Rocky Mountain Partnership ahead of time about what's our local workforce look like now, what are the growing fields, what are the in-demand skills, those kind of things. And we determined kind of 3 of them that are more responsive to the existing workforce, and 3 of them that are just a little bit more aspirational, where we're trying to set future goals and future workforce goals. So the 3 that are current is more the manufacturing, logistics, and construction side, where we're working on skills and certificates in those areas. And then information technology, healthcare, and honestly, English as a second language and translation capabilities. Those are all a little bit more aspirational, where we're trying to help our workforce lean into some of those future-looking fields. So those were identified as our core components. Then we went out and started having conversations with some of our workforce and training providers, and CCA really rose to the top as somebody who was, willing to really step up and become a partner with us. And then we, Rocky Mountain Partnership again helped facilitate some of the arrangements and the details and the goals and the targets and the budgets. And ultimately, we have committed $400,000 from city ARPA funds towards this training opportunity. And I can turn it over to Bobby to talk a little bit more about who's applying and who's succeeding and all that kind of stuff.
Well, everyone's succeeding, right? So it's also too early in some ways to tell if folks aren't succeeding. So that's the beautiful part. Right now, everyone's succeeding.
It launched roughly a year ago. In the summertime last year.
Yep. So. And actually, that's a great segue. So since roughly summertime last year. We have had 120 individual students that have been part of this program that we've been able to serve. As Garrett mentioned, these are short term, but short term doesn't mean always really short. So we're kind of looking at things. A student can earn, or a learner can earn, an associate's degree in these programs, but all of these max out at a year that we've been really focused on. And so, there's a few areas of study that are big, and they all align with what Garrett had mentioned that are city priorities. So diesel is a perfect example. Now, you've got trucking, and that's certainly relevant, and we could do a CDL program. That's certainly that's viable. It's on the table, that kind of thing. But at the same time, we can do diesel engineering and diesel tech. And so we have some really amazing partnerships, industry partnerships with Transwest and Wagner and all sorts of different folks that are there in and around Commerce City. And so diesel's been a huge thing that our learners have been interested in. Behavioral health has been another growing area. We have 24 learners that have already been in our behavioral health certification program. That I think is exceptionally important, because there's a cultural responsiveness and interpretation of what sort of mental health care provisions can look like at a local level and sort of in the cultural context of communities. And so having someone that may speak your own language and understand from where you are and how mental health issues are often defined within your communities is a great way of making sure that folks trust the process of being vulnerable in those conversations. And so that's been huge. EMT, musical or emergency medical technicians have been very huge. And then to Garrett's point, English language acquisition, so ESL, that's been really important, especially as we think about vocational ESL. So it doesn't necessarily mean that a person needs to know everything, but if we can get them trained in, say, the construction fields or hospitality or the entrepreneurship pieces, if you can understand banking and those particular terms, that can be, again, another great skill set for folks. So really thinking about matching students from an intake perspective of what their passions are, aligning that with what the city's goals and outcomes are, and then matching from a back end standpoint that the students don't necessarily see, but what our employers in the community are saying are the top skills that are necessary for them. So picture our programming as one big partnership, and Rocky Mountain Partnerships has been so great with connecting us with different industry partners here. But what you're really thinking about in some of these pieces is this notion of how are we then bridging that gap so that it's not just about the credential, it's about the skill alignment for the students, so that we know that they'll be able to get a job once they're done with this in their local community.
And I just wanted to add, I put in our chat, but I'm not sure how that goes. Oh, Mallory says she already dropped in the LinkedIn chat. So excellent. Yeah. So what we just dropped in there was the link to the Commerce City program Commerce City Promise program on the CCA website. And that, expands. I was just mentioning those 6 broad categories, but yeah, as Dr. Bobby said, healthcare includes those behavioral certificates, the EMT, the nursing, patient care, phlebotomy. Logistics includes the diesel power, and also truck driver and HR. And there's a lot of subcategories in each of these broader categories. So, but that's all in the link, or you can just Google Commerce City Promise. It'll be the first thing that comes up.
Which is incredible. I'm sure anybody who's listening to this is, one, inspired by what's possible, and probably asking how did they get this connection? Because Dr. Bobby, you mentioned it, the bridging across these key partners. We know that the workforce system is notoriously fragmented, and you all are talking about working across multiple sectors, multiple industries. And what we know is just in one, you can have a lot of providers, a lot of programs, a lot of employers. And so, often operating in silos too, just in that one industry. And so you all have talked about the work that's expansive across multiple industries, that you all have been able to even, tailor the supports that are individualized to the learner. I think Dr. Bobby even talking about really honing in on what are the skills for that future ready workforce as well. And so I'd be curious for you all to talk a little bit, bring us behind the curtain a little bit. What did that landscape look like? Was there some fragmentation on the ground? And, how did that make very clear that there was this need for a collective approach to move forward? And so bring us along a little bit in how you all solved through that notoriously fragmented workforce system.
Yeah, if I could go, many of you that are watching probably also work either for some sort of elected official city council kind of board, or even just a board of directors for your nonprofit or whatever. But many of the times the direction from that board is there's some problem that has been identified and we need to fix it. We need to come up with some solution, right? Our philosophy has been to take an extra few minutes here and look at who else is already doing this in the ecosystem, and see if there's a way that, rather than us reinventing that new program just to identify a solution to this, see who's already working on that answer and see what we can do to support them, rather than trying to create an additional silo, an additional layer of fragmentation as we try to solve this problem. So that's really what we did, is we looked at our K-12, K through 12 systems in community, and seeing who they were using for their training. We looked at employers, and a lot of our employers were already engaged with CCA, which gave us a great recommendation that they were a good partner even before we started this. And then we really tried to use Rocky Mountain Partnership as much as possible to facilitate the data, the goals, the numbers of what we're all trying to achieve, and get everybody on the same page. I find that whenever we're building partnerships, it's always good to make sure that everybody understands what they're getting out of the partnership, and knowing what they can bring back to their boards, their elected officials, their whoever, to show that success is part of the vision and part of the outcomes that are being promised. And as long as everybody can feel like they can succeed and have some deliverables at the end of the day that proves that success, I find that everybody's very willing to partner and move forward. So that we started with CCA under those assumptions that we want them to succeed as much as we want to achieve our own goals. So.
Yeah, and I would say, to piggyback off that, we have a sort of a philosophy here that everything has to be a win-win. And so that's that idea. Like, we all do better when we all do better. And so how are we ensuring that the learners are achieving? How are we ensuring that we're talking to the right folks? That's where Rocky Mountain Partnership has been so fantastic about getting us FaceTime, quite frankly, in front of the right industry partners. Commerce City has been phenomenal in terms of being very clear on what they can do. And I think that's been an important element of kind of how we're developing ourselves as anchor institutions within this reality, is that we can't all be all things to all people. And so one of the things that typically happens is a college comes in and then they have their way of doing something, and the city comes in and they have their way, and your nonprofits come in and they have their ways, and it's got to be our ways. And so how we're able to bring everything together holistically and think, what's the role we can play in this process? Making sure that we're all centered on that learner's success, knowing that learner's success, what that physically means for each and every one of us may be different, but what it means collectively for all of us is a stronger community. And so as long as we're kind of understanding that focusing on the learner at that center, and then inviting the voices of other people in, and not thinking that we're going to be the ones to just make everything happen and it's going to be one size fits all, as maybe it was in this community or that community, but really thinking about how can we come and help provide opportunities in partnership with this community. And I think that's really the piece that, Lexi, to your point, allows a collaboration that is special and unique. But there is a lot of identity work on the back end that often has to be challenged, and assumptions that have to be challenged, to be able to get to that point. And I think we've just had such great partnership here, because there isn't an agenda for any one of our organizations outside of improving the lives of the residents of our service areas, right? And our state.
Wow. And that is so palpable. Even as you all are talking, I can see in partnership, y'all are nodding and agreeing in that kind of core values that are driving the work. And I love, because I hear in you all reflecting around the work that in the collective approach, you all were leveraging each unique partner's strength too in what they brought. And it was the clear buy-in to the win-win and the shared commitment to student success. And then it was, distinct, saying, this is what we can do. And I love, Dr. Bobby, you said that we can't be all things to all the people. And so how do we do this in partnership with that shared kind of core value? And it takes time, it takes work. And I think, it makes me really curious about then, once you get the buy-in, once you get the excitement and you have that shared align, how do you really get clear on what you're trying to drive? And so, you all have a really unique and in some cases unusual cross-sector table right here. The community college, city government, employers, workforce, key community regional partners. How did you get the right people to the table, right? And more importantly, when you were at the table, how did you all align around that shared goal? Yes, you can hear clearly you all saying we need student success. And you all have already talked a little bit about thinking about employment and mapping what good employment looks like. How do you get to a clear definition of what employment and good wage look like? So bring us a little bit along of what does it look like to curate the right table? And then at that table, how do you align on those shared goals and shared definitions?
I can kick us off, and then I think this is really for Garrett and Dr. Bobby to speak to. But from the RMP side of it, I think first, and you can hear it from both of you here today, is like we're really fortunate to have partners that are focused on outcomes. First and foremost. And I think that really sets us up for success because of the way that they each already approach the work as humans, but also as entities. Because you're right, it is a really large cross-sector table. But for this particular project, I think we were really lucky, and it happened relatively quickly in terms of this opportunity being identified and them reaching out to us to help figure out what that looked like. And then it was really a group effort of getting the other partners at the table and making those connections. I just wanted to speak a little bit to like the shared definitions. What do we mean about employment and a good wage? And there's a link that I think you all can drop in the chat that really looks at that, because the reality is that there are so many different ways, and there's not really just one sole metric that tells us whether or not a young person is obtaining employment at a good wage. But what we did is, I mentioned that Colorado Talent Pipeline report that comes out every year. And we brought that to the table and started looking at what are the living wages in Adams County. I believe it's around $52,000 a year for a single person. And really, it was a matchmaking of like, what are the top jobs that we're looking to align pathways to? Are they at this level, or could they be at that level relatively quickly with whatever that given pathway is, so that it's, something really attainable and worthwhile for these young people and adults that are going through this program, because the idea is that they're getting credentials that could lead to those jobs that are available in the community right now. So from a technical standpoint, that's what's happening on our end, but I will open it up to my two partners here to talk about what it was like on their experience around getting all of these partners to reach consensus.
I think consensus is an ongoing reality, right? And so, there's a few things that we've really been focusing on, and one of them is kind of how we deal just holistically with our career connection portion. So, as a college, we've really leaned into and developed uh, career connected curriculum, and so essentially every single student has a academic course map or an academic plan that says this semester or this sequence you're going to take these courses, and then next to that is a career plan. So you've got, okay, so here's when I am going to be taking these classes, but here's where I'm going to be writing my resume or doing my internship or doing an exploration with a career. And so really thinking about holistically both sides of the journey. And I think at a lot of colleges and institutions, those are often done separately. So like one lives in a student success area, one lives in an academic area. And what we're really trying to do as a college is make sure that we are bringing these pieces together, and that we're treating it as one. And so what we've been doing is a couple different things. One, having some on-site supports and planning on the development of on-site supports, both here at CCA that are unique for our Commerce City Promise population, but also on-site supports within the city itself. And so Garrett's mentioned before, like every time there's an event where we can host a table and where we can put folks at, like we're there. And so we're definitely very much out there in the community to try to build trust and understand what folks are going through. We have a job placement and pipeline piece where we're building relationships with the employers to make sure that we understand what their needs are and what those needs are from at least a couple years out. Not saying it's going to be 10 years. We're not looking at that kind of forecasting, but we don't want to train 70 people when there's 20 jobs that are available for them in that particular industry and give false promises. So having a clearer understanding of what those needs truly are. And then ultimately, we're doing skill alignment from an academic side with those partners through advisory boards and the like to make sure that there is that reciprocity. So it's not just, oh, you say you need these soft skills like, we call them durable skills now, but essentially you need to be able to have interpersonal communication skills, not just with customers, but with your fellow employees as you're working on a project. Okay, you've got that. Let's figure out whether or not we're actually doing it. You say you need it. We say we've put it in the curriculum. Now, with those graduates, have we hit the nail on the head, right? Or do we need to continue to tweak? So that's what I mean by a reciprocal relationship here and a reciprocal aspect of quality control, for lack of a better term, with the curriculum to make sure we're hitting the metrics.
Man, I really appreciate you walking us through that, because I think you're not just talking about the collective approach, you're talking about the embodiment of the collective approach and that commitment to that consensus. And what does it look like to really be committed to not only grounding and shared definitions, but the iterative process to keep coming back and saying, is that working for the people that are at the table? And what does it look like to continue to evolve that work and really meet the moment? And so, I think you even paint that with how you engage employers too, right? Not only continuing to uplift the opportunity for learners to, leverage the pathways, but then also keeping it really relevant to employers to say, what does it look like to have a strong workforce? And what are the skills that are necessary? And how does that align with the pathways? Really linking all of that. We know that's not easy. And I see a question coming in around some of the challenges of that. So any kind of reflections, as you all have already seen some of the success of that, of, I always call them crunchy moments or pain points, some people might say, of embodying that collective approach across multiple sectors. Anything folks want to kind of, in hindsight, or just, a word to the wise that they would say around any challenges they faced around that collective approach? Oh, Garrett, you're off mute. Come, probably saying something
Dang it.
profound.
Yeah, I was
Dropping
just
all
gonna say
the wisdom.
one of our, kind of similar to what I said before. One of our first challenges was that ultimately this was a directive from our elected officials, and they, of course, had this vision of we're going to change the workforce in the community, and it's all going to be tech and aerospace and all this kind of stuff. And that was where they really wanted to focus the job training, and we really had to bring data forward to help them understand what are the actual in-demand skills in our community, both in the workforce as well as the workplace, and just help them be a little bit more grounded on what are the realistic goals, and what is what are the places we already have some momentum that we can build upon. So I think that was one of the bigger ones at first. Later, there was challenges on just making sure we've got all the right certificate programs included here. And as we started enrolling students, there was some questions about, does this certificate fit what we're trying to do? Does this one fit what we've already approved? And we had to kind of tweak a little bit on what classes were approved and what, what we didn't really focus on. Also, because of the nature of the ARPA funding, we really had to stick with only residents of the city limits. And the way our community has grown and annexed and things, there's some pretty squiggly city limits lines around our community, and that became an issue for some of the registration as well. But yeah, we've been painting a very, very rosy picture here, but there's been a lot of hard work on the back end to make sure that we're staying on the same page, that we're communicating in a way that helps everybody feel like we're comfortable moving forward every step. So a lot of communication, a lot of meetings, a lot of facilitation, mostly by Rocky Mountain Partnership to keep us on track.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is part of what we've learned, and so in hindsight, if anyone is doing this moving forward, is that our terminology is very different. And we say programmer, we say pathway, and the city has one idea of what that may mean. We have another idea of what that may mean. Norming, and then if you throw in our K-12 partners like Adams 14 in this, well, then they have a whole different idea, right, of what some of these things mean. And so there was a bit of a learning curve of making sure that we were not just on the same page, but that like what you're saying, we want to just make sure we want to honor what it is that we're committing to. And so we want to make sure that what you're saying is what we can deliver on across the board. And so there's that piece. I think another piece that's been from a learner perspective is it's sometimes just hard to look at people and say, you know what, I know that you want to be a part of this program. This is not necessarily an aligned certificate or degree for where the industry for the community is really looking at. So what the city's commitments are. And that's a challenge, but it's a challenge for all institutions because you have this idea of come learn anything, learn everything. And you can change that to say, you can come learn anything, learn everything, but you can't necessarily do it all at once. And so let's get you into this and let's get you working and employed and earning that income. And then you could be looking at continuing your education into a stackable credential or into an additional field or into a different piece. So it's norming expectations with the learners. I think that's also something that's really important across the board.
Yeah, it seems like those lessons of the collective approach are at all the levels, from the institutional partnership to the support in partnership with learners and families and navigating that. And I'll keep coming back to your point, Dr. Robbie, and it's continuous. Like we have to be committed and relentless to making sure everybody, is clear on what's possible. And, I think, Garrett, to your point, really right sizing the expectations too of the resources we have available. And I think, then folks probably are getting really curious too about, the progress and what the success of this work really means. And, employment opportunities is so deeply tethered to economic development and kind of the lens and approach around that. So, how is the C3 promise promise, really closing that gap between the employer demand and these priority industries you all have named that are really driving the region. You named a little bit like the construction, the healthcare, and even that, expands to behavioral health. And then there's the advanced manufacturing, like the scope of that work, and kind of the credentials and careers that are being built around them. So from an economic development lens, how are you all really seeing this C3 Promise work strengthening that?
Sure, yeah, that's one of the things that we really bring to the table. We, as much as we want to pat ourselves on the back for doing a workforce program, we actually don't do any of the instruction. All the instruction is on the CCA side. We're providing the funding, but the other main thing we're providing is the relationships with our local employers, and to be able to communicate with them on what do they need from us, what are they looking to, what are their hiring pathways look like, what are their who are they willing to take a risk on as they're just barely coming out of training, and then the community and the schools in the community. So we bring that additional relationship aspect to both the households in the community as well as the employers in the community, and that's where we're really, over the past year, we're hitting the streets and talking to employers, and all the normal things that we usually offer as a community, as community support. But we're also saying, we've got this training program. We'd love to see you participate and help us understand what it is you're looking for and what do you need out of our workforce partners in the area. And we're just helping close a lot of those relationship loops, to keep everybody working towards the same goals.
Mm-hmm. And it's important. And I think, again, there's so many threads of the kind of best practices of leveraging each other's institutional strengths and resourcing too. I want to get to some few more questions before we have to close out. And I want to make the call to everybody listening too. If you have questions for the incredible leaders on this call around this work, please send them our way. We'll have some time before we end to do a quick little Q&A. And thank you to those who have already added some questions along the way. Hopefully we've weaved them into the conversation. Dr. Bobby, I'm curious to how is, the Community College of Aurora really designing these credential paths? You talked about so many and that, don't just expand access, but that really are intentional as they lead to jobs and wages, and really support that larger goal of economic prosperity and generational wealth. Those are not light concepts or goals to be having. So, at the community college level, how are you all seeing that design and intentional pathways?
Well, I think Jody, she mentioned the key part, which is that Colorado Talent Pipeline report that comes out annually. For the most part, it's fairly consistent. There's some weird things that pop up every now and then. There was the radio DJ piece popped up one year as a promising program, and so it was kind of interesting. But most of them are pretty standard. They tend to kind of be trends over time with both earning incomes, but then also projected needs. And the cool thing about that talent pipeline report is it also indicates sort of what the career levels are, or excuse me, the credential levels are for entry points. And so we really take a look at that and we sort of say, what are the things where you might need just a high school diploma, but you may need an industry-based credential or skill? How can we then connect that, right? So yeah, you don't need an employer doesn't need a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree to make that happen, but they do still want kind of this high school diploma plus. And so we look at those pieces. One of the other pieces we work with, Four Rivers, and I already mentioned Wagner and Transwest. There's a bunch of different industries. RK Mechanical, which is both, it's in Aurora, but it still serves in those areas. We look at a number of those folks and really partner with them to make sure that the curriculum alignment is up to date. And if we need to make revisions, we do. We do what's known as a program review every year, but every 4 years we do a comprehensive program review, which essentially looks at our academic portfolio and says, are there degrees now that don't make sense for us? And if they don't, then we phase them out. And so that's painful. It's hard. We've eliminated 34 programs in the past 5 years now. But we've also launched almost an equal number, right? And so I always think of this as kind of pruning. I explain it as you're pruning a rose bush, right? It's like you don't want the rose bush to die. So you're pruning it in the areas where growth is happening and directing that growth, and you're getting rid of those areas that aren't growing anymore and aren't working. And so we really do look at the job prospects and spend a lot of time with the data. Rocky Mountain Partnership's been fantastic with providing additional data. The city, Commerce City, has been phenomenal in having some more nuanced data. We're very interested in the Derby neighborhood, and so really understanding what's happening in the Derby neighborhood. And shout out to them for the Derby that's happening on Saturday, for the Kentucky Derby. And so, there will be a lot of pieces of that. But again, those kinds of things are about not being all things at all times, but really thinking about, in a state of limited resources, where can we be the most intentional and have the best bang for the buck for the learners that are here, so that we're not promising them jobs that won't be there when they graduate.
Absolutely. Oh, and it's so powerful, because I think it just opens up a world of opportunity to what does it look like to grow this great work. And I think, that is where we, want to also talk about the success of this work. And, there's even a question from Bridget around, what does progress and retention of this work look like? And, called out and named, to your point, Garrett, it's unique to have a place-based promise, program funded through a municipality. And what does that progress look like? And I know you all have some really strong numbers of 120 learners, unique learners, who have been provided these opportunities and pathways. So it would be great to kind of hear from both avenues. One, just what does that look like for learners and families in the next generation? And, even what does that continued success look like from how the municipalities are seeing that, and the retention and those kind of systems level success metrics. So maybe we could speak, to that systems change, and also what this means for students, because you all already named it. That's what really is the shared commitment to this work. And so whoever wants to speak to either, I think that's a great way for us to start rounding out the conversation. Rock, paper, scissors. I see it.
Yeah. So one of the intriguing elements for us is really, I mentioned the much of our community is a Hispanic community, that many of them immigrants to the state of Colorado, or the country even. So many of our graduates coming out of the Adams 14 High School District are our first time college learners as they're applying at CCA or other institutions. And that presents a kind of a unique challenge, where their parents are not really in the position to help guide them and support them with the kind of decision making and expectations that are needed. So we rely a lot on CCA. Their financial aid office is fantastic about getting easy answers and concrete answers in a variety of languages out to the student body. But we also, as part of our outreach for that broader ACT program, we have a workforce navigator that helps get that education resource out to the families. And very much like Bobby said, we're out there also tabling all the events we can, all the summer concerts in the park and parades and whatever. We're there trying to provide as much outreach and education as possible to these families that typically have not had college on their radar as an expectation in the past, and that's a cultural change for a lot of our families, but a very positive one. So we're happy to support. And overall, the other opportunities that's kind of fun is sometimes we're seeing not only the students that are coming out of the K-12 system that are looking at college, but also their parents who have never done a formal education before, also looking at programming at CCA. as a potential pathway forward. And we're seeing a multi-generational approach at looking at some of these new education programs as a path forward for a better career.
Oh my goodness. Very exciting. So, so exciting. Okay, well, thank you for just a little snapshot of what the progress and what's possible to grow. With our final question to close this out, I would love for you all to kind of share a piece of advice for folks who in their own community are thinking about growing, strengthening, starting their partnerships to strengthen employment outcomes in their own community. Maybe we'll start with Dr. Bobby, Garrett, and then our partners at Rocky Mountain Partnership can close us out.
Yeah, so I would say the key, and it's not good for any academic because we don't do it well, but is to be humble and to recognize that you don't have the answers. So how are we going to listen to the community and hear what their actual needs are, not what we think their needs are? So starting off from a place of inquiry and humility, I think, is the most important part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that a lot. One of the kind of mantras that we go by with my department here is that the best time to make friends is before you need them. So in many respects, a lot of the groundwork was laid for this program years and years ago, before any of us really needed anything from each other. We were just talking to each other at community events and getting to know each other and just understanding who the rest of the ecosystem partners are. And then when it comes time to actually put that together into a program, there's a lot of familiar faces in the room. So that would be my main advice is, as Bobby said, be humble enough to understand you don't do everything and know everything by yourself, and look at those that are doing good things in the ecosystem and see how you can support them rather than trying to reinvent that wheel and do it yourself.
I don't know if I can say it better than that. I echo both of those sentiments. I think I maybe just will add in the data piece, is that bringing in like having that data to back up what you're doing. But I think to Garrett's point, it's really the coalition of the committed and doing the work where there's already good relationships and momentum, because then you have success, I mean, it's a snowball effect, and it really creates the opportunity to demonstrate what can happen when we come together to work on these things. So.
Wow. Well, incredible pieces of wisdom on top of an abundance of insights you all shared about this work happening in Commerce City, in the northern, metro area in Colorado. So I just want to give you all a big thank you for joining us today, and to everybody, but a special thanks to our incredible leaders, Jody, Garrett, and Dr. Bobby, for sharing more about the work and the impact that Rocky Mountain Partnership is having. StriveTogether has recently published a blog detailing some of this incredible work happening through Rocky Mountain Partnership's work specifically around employment. So please check that out. And if you and your team are looking to make a similar impact in employment, turn to the StriveTogether employment playbooks to get that conversation started in your community. And we'll be sure to share those links if you'd like to learn more. So otherwise, you can stay connected to StriveTogether and the cradle-to-career network by taking courses in our training hub. And the training hub provides easy to access, high quality training grounded in proven approaches and tested by leaders across the country. As you've heard from conversations today, and those courses build leaders' capabilities to work across sectors, change systems, and improve outcomes. So you can learn more and register for the courses, link in the chat. And just again, thank you for the wisdom. And it's such a privilege to hear about the work happening in Colorado.
Thank you.